Right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. There's a lot going on in Parliament. We've been bringing you regular updates in our news bulletin every day on what happens in Parliament. And this caused a fair amount of confusion, right? So on one hand, let me just quickly take you through what has happened. Two sessions of Parliament last year were cancelled because of COVID. One session, which was the budget session, was actually truncated. So it was made shorter because of COVID, also because everybody wanted to go campaigning for the state elections that was also taking place. So now we are in this monsoon session, which is important because this is the first time Parliament's having an opportunity to have discussions about the big things that are going on in our country. Handling of COVID, handling of the vaccine policy, handling of the economy, and lots of things that are fallout of that. Plus, there's the whole Pegasus issue, there's the farm bills that weren't really truly discussed in Parliament. So you have the opposition that's demanding conversation or debate and structured debate and is not budging from that disruption route that the opposition has taken. On the other hand, you have the government that has decided to not pay attention to what the opposition is doing and sort of single-mindedly hammer through the system the bills that the government wants to pass. And it's not one or two bills, it's close to 10 bills that the government has passed with little or no discussion on those bills. Now, which of these two things is right? Is the opposition right in continuing to disrupt Parliament? Are they allowed to do so? Is this the right strategy? That's one set of questions. Is the government right in pushing through these bills without any discussion or any scrutiny because they believe, the government says it believes that business must go on? Which of these two things are right? On the other hand, there are other issues. The standing committees, for example. Now, we know that the standing committees is supposed to be a respected structure of Parliament, where basically a committee is created of various members of Parliament who are of different parties, some opposition, some within the government. The standing committee is meant to look at certain specific issues. Now, one of the issues that happened was a standing committee on IT. They had summoned the IS officers of 3 important ministries to come before that committee and answer questions on Pegasus. All 3 ministries refused to or cancelled their appointments and did not show up. Now, this brings another question of whether basically politics has seeped into the standing committee, whether politics has seeped into getting any work done. Fundamentally, who loses, guys? You and I do as citizens, right? Because our laws are being changed right now without any discussion, without proper scrutiny. And people who are meant to be representatives of us in Parliament, who should be asking questions on our behalf, who should be getting answers for us, aren't able to do that either. So where is this breakdown really coming from? Is the government right now undermining Parliament? Or is opposition really unable to make Parliament work for it? Because the opposition also has a certain responsibility. Where are we falling short? That's the question that we're asking. Is Parliament doing its job? Now I've given you that long introduction. Let me take you through our 3 guests, picked very carefully because of their understanding of politics, of Parliament, and of government. Ms. Radhika Ramaseshan is a senior journalist who's tracked politics for decades and decades. Mr. Sharat Pradhan, a senior journalist based out of Uttar Pradesh, where politics is most interesting, joins us as well. Meghnad, associate editor of Newslaundry. A lot of people on the internet are very familiar with Meghnad. Meghnad has made it his business to understand how Parliament functions. And a lot of young people take their cues from Meghnad on what is going on. I welcome all 3 of you to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I must also mention the opposition held a meeting today, which Mayawati's BSP and the Aam Aadmi Party decided to skip. So now people are asking, what about these 2 guys? Are they with the government right now? Are they not with anybody? What does that mean? And we'll come to that question in a bit. Let me start with Radhika ji. Good evening. If you would take us through a civics class, ma'am, if you would. Is disruption in the manner that the opposition is doing, is that allowed? Is that okay? Is it kosher? And government pushing through bills without any discussion, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, to answer your first question about disruption, of course, there is no sort of law or parliamentary norm that states that Parliament or the House cannot be disrupted. And, every party, every opposition party has been doing it in the past. I mean, let's just examine the BJP's record when it was in the opposition. I mean, there is so much of dissimulation on the part of the BJP, but I really don't think they have a place to hide, Faye. because I will just quote two examples from the late Mr. Arun Jaitley, when he was a leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha, and Miss Sushma Swaraj, late Miss Sushma Swaraj, who was the LOP in Lok Sabha. Now, this was in 2011. If you recall, the BJP did not give the Manmohan Singh government, UPA, both in its first and second tenure, more in the second tenure, I mean, any kind of chance, Manmohan Singh wasn't even allowed to introduce his ministers on the floor of the House. When the budget was presented, there was any number of disruption. And in 2011, this is what Arun Jaitley told the press on the sidelines of a BJP meet in Ranchi. Parliament's job is to conduct discussions, but many a time Parliament is used to ignore issues, and in such situations, obstruction of Parliament is in favor of democracy. Therefore, parliamentary obstruction is not undemocratic. So, and on another occasion in 2012, he also said, we do not want to give the government an escape route through debate. So the BJP opted for obstruction as the only modus operandi. And this is what Mrs. Swaraj had to say. Not allowing parliament to function is also a form of democracy, like any other form. I mean, both these statements were in response to the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's lament against the opposition, calling it a negation of democracy. And at that point, the BJP said the disruption was necessary to draw the country's attention to the UPA government's role in the coal block allocation scam. And this is the logic which Arun Jaitley gave. He said that, if you remember, I mean, that was long, long ago, in 1995, an entire winter session, because I remember I was covering Rajya Sabha then, an entire winter session was washed out because the BJP wanted Sukram, the then telecommunications minister, to resign over a telephony scam. He just wouldn't allow the House to function. And so Arun Jaitley's logic was that kind of continued disruption led to a cleaning up of the whole telephony process, though I'm not very sure whether that really happened. The entire system of tenders and bidding and etc. He claimed that the BJP's disruption actually cleaned up the system, and therefore they wanted something similar to be done in the case of coal allocation. So now clearly the shoe is on the other foot. The major difference being that the UPA or the Congress under PV Narasimha Rao did cave in to the BJP's pressure tactics, to the disruptionist tactics, whereas in this case, right from the beginning, and whatever you said is absolutely right, they are hammering out bills, they are rushing through bills. That has been going on for in every session, the farmers' bills being a classic example. They just rammed through the whole thing without considering the ramifications. And look, I mean, where we are today, the protests are continuing. So this is the state of the BJP when it is in the opposition and when it is in government.
Yeah. In fact, I want to thank Rashna and Lalit for supporting us financially, but we have a question from Shamita Dasgupta. She said, do you think the government wants disruption to continue so they can pass bills without discussion? Like today, the tribunals bill that was passed in Lok Sabha removes tribunals from many important acts. It's also, removed effectively the power of government employees in factories from striking. These are important things that have gone by without any discussion. Is it actually playing into the BJP's hands, Radhika ji, to continue this, obstruction?
Well, yes, if you that's one way. I mean, that's definitely one way of looking at it. As I said, The opposition didn't bargain for the strong arm tactics that the BJP uses. I mean, with the kind of majority it has. But let's remember, Rajiv Gandhi had an even bigger majority in Sharat has covered that phase very closely. He will remember. In spite of that, I mean, that was an overwhelming, the Treasury bench was overwhelming in its strength. The opposition was quite small. Even then, when the opposition protested and together en masse, the BJP was part of the opposition then, the Rajiv Gandhi government did give in to their demand for a JPC into the Bofors scam. Now, nothing of that sort is happening here. I mean, they are not yielding even a centimeter to the opposition's demands. I mean, they are out to reinforce a macho kind of, the macho kind of politics that they are pursuing, muscular, and the opposition is irrelevant. And yes, you are right. It does help them to push through bills like the tribunal. There is another defense-related bills. Barring these two, every one of these legislations impacts our lives, your life, my life. And, if you read the fine print, only then you realize that what you are in for. I would imagine that the Congress should use an amalgamation of tactics, disrupt for a while, but ensure that there is some kind of a discussion when an important bill is passed, instead of sticking to its one-point demand of a debate on Pegasus. One is not even sure whether the Pegasus issue is having the kind of impact on the ground that the opposition would like. So therefore, I think it has to be a tactical amalgamation of disruption as well as normalcy, allowing the House to run so that at least there is a semblance of debate on a particular bill. But you're very right. They've stopped sending bills to the standing committees panels. So, I mean, everything is rushed through. So in the end, even that may not have much of an impact, but at least let the opposition have its say for a while, in the House.
I just want to bring in Meghnad to clear a couple of things. Meghnad, can the government shorten the length of this session again? Can it make that unilateral decision, say, too much disruption, so enough, we're going to stop now and not go on for the next couple of days? That's one question. Second question, this business of not scrutinizing, not discussing bills. Obviously, what happens then is that bills just go through without citizens even finding out what is in it, because it's only when it's discussed, it gets carried in the media, people find out what is being passed. Does the government have the ability to push through bills without putting it to a standing committee, without having any discussion? Is this all part of the rules?
So the first question, yes, they can. I mean, they can just always say that COVID cases are rising, so we'll not continue the parliament. They don't even have to give a reason कि disruption हो रहा है. They can just give any reason. That doesn't matter. The government takes a call on when the parliament function and when it doesn't function. And that is actually one of the part of the problems of why disruptions also happen. Because think about it, like last week itself, 10 bills were passed, right? And we did some research and for Sansad Watch. We found out that the total number of time that was spent on those bills was 1 hour 37 minutes, right? The movie Rajniti is 2 hours 50 minutes long, right? So I mean, like 10 bills. And just to give you an instance of what kind of bills were passed, there was this one particular bill on airport authorities, right? So you know that there is a spate of privatization of airports that is going on. What they found out that there are some profitable airports which everybody wants, and there are some non-profitable airports which the government has to support. So now they have passed a bill which will cluster it, and it's like तुम profitable airport पे bid करो और other airport free cluster में मिल जाएगा. Right?
Buy one get one free.
Yeah, so it's essentially, I mean, it's an important bill. It actually tells us how it's actually affecting air traffic in the country, airport management, also corporate takeover of airports. So many issues to be discussed. That was passed in 11 minutes. Right. And 11 minutes, that includes the speech, introduction speech, voting, and the response by the government, the minister.
Let me just pause you for a second and tell our audience that in the last couple of years, Adani has become the largest owner of airports in our country.
Yeah.
By just getting grants from the government to manage it. Continue, please.
Right. So, so that's what, it's an important issue that would have been brought up during the discussion. Think about it. Like, if that discussion actually happened for, say, 3 hours, right? I'm not even saying like 2 days or whatever, just a 3-hour full discussion in one house. These points would have been brought up, right? Every MP from the different parties would have different perspectives. Not just that, there would be certain MPs who would want to make demands for airports as well. Right, when the aviation minister
and also,
is there,
Meghnad, different states would have had different opinions about the airports in those states. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So lots of things to discuss. That is how policy is made. But what is happening right now is, as that comment also said, and as Radhika did rightly pointed out, the government is taking advantage of this situation. Right. The thing is that now they have to also project like an efficiency. So they always say that, oh, look, we have cleared 10 bills in an hour. That's actually great. It's like a soap factory. We'll just produce soap after soap. And like, it's just, and the narrative is that that is what efficiency looks like. Because earlier during the UPA, the narrative that was built up again by the BJP was policy paralysis, which means that nothing is happening. But actually, now it's the opposite, which is more dangerous. I mean, I'd rather not have any laws being passed, which are affecting us and which would affect us in a wrong way, like the farm bills, than shady laws being passed without discussion. So, yeah.
So now we're taking this discussion to Mr. Sharat Pradhan. Yeah. Should the opposition be watching the 2.5 hours of Rajniti at least? Because is their strategy wrong? Because are they missing the bus on this? I mean, today, if you read the news as a citizen, I think as journalists, we tend to be plugged into it. So we have more developed because we spend so much time. Yeah. Rahul Gandhi cycled to Parliament today. Randomly, I mean, I don't even have track of what he's protesting anymore and what his purpose is anymore. But, there seems to be a lack of coherence in the opposition's sort of strategy of what they're doing in Parliament. And I know there would be people who say that, as journalists, you guys are beating up the opposition all the time, but the opposition has a responsibility, to structure what they're going to do in Parliament. Are they doing it wrong, Mr. Pradhan?
Well, it has become, Faye, it is becoming like a vicious circle. If you do not, that is the least that the opposition can do, is to protest. And taking the protest to this level, it can't be helped for them, because the ruling dispensation is not ready to concede one bit. Which is, because the problem with this government is that they are so used to working on their own whims, on probably the whims of one man. And so there is basically there is no semblance of a democratic setup.
No, sorry, quick question. Is this a factor of the fact that we now have a government that has this great Bahumat of over 300 seats, and hence doesn't really need to rely on its allies, doesn't really need to rely on the opposition? So is this, this sort of muscle power that you're talking about, this brute power to push things through Parliament, is this actually a grant of the democracy to this government?
It is a misuse of that grant, which, as Radhika rightly pointed out, there was Rajiv Gandhi in the 80s had a larger majority, but they never treated the opposition like dirt. They still gave them space. And in a setup today, unfortunately, they just want to have nothing to do with the opposition. Said, okay, we make them absolutely irrelevant. But the problem is, and what they are doing by clearing all kinds of shady bills, I would say, and doing whatever they want to do, they are able to get away with murder. And nothing succeeds like success. But what does the opposition, I think what Radhika said, she's raised a very good point. An amalgamation of the two, a balance. This is what the opposition needs to do. Because they are using the opposition strategy to their advantage. In the bargain, like now that the opposition is not letting them function, they are able to speed up all the, and imagine what a mockery. If you clear all those bills, Meghnad just pointed out, in 3 hours, 10 bills in 3 hours. That's the total time. Or less than 3 hours.
1 hour, 37
Sorry, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Imagine.
You are thinking of Rajneeti. Yeah.
So, either way, they are making a mockery of the whole system. And so, the opposition has to put their minds together and find a strategy which can tackle the issues. It just blindly following a protest line may not be very good will not be in the larger interest of the democracy. Ultimately, the government is able to push whatever it wants to. And in the bargain, what we are getting is Adani getting more and more of the airports and more. And similarly, other issues, which, and people would not, the man on the street would not even know what all has happened, what all laws have been amended, what all new laws have come in, because there's no talk about it.
In fact, one of the bills that was passed through Rajya Sabha, Mr. Pradhan, the Juvenile Justice Bill was amended with 5 minutes of discussion, excluding the minister's speech. The factoring regulation, the National Institute of Food Technology and Entrepreneurship Management Bill, insolvency bankruptcy code was actually, amended with 5 minutes. In 5 minutes. These are serious things. These are not
juvenile justice. Juvenile justice is a very important issue, and the way it is misused in the states, we know of so many cases here, how it is misused and the way it is treated. Though this is going to make it worse. This is good. Now we don't. I mean, for instance, even I don't know what has happened. What has happened? One will have to go into the larger. I'm sure a lot of judges would not be knowing what's happening. This is not the way. This is not the way.
Meghnad will tell us what happened in the Juvenile Justice Amendment.
So the Juvenile Justice Bill is about adoption mostly. So essentially, there was this long, lengthy process in courts when you wanted to get an adoption done.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is that the DMs will now take a call on who gets adopted and who doesn't. So essentially, it was also found by different human rights organizations that all these childcare homes, they are not obeying the old law. So now they have given all the powers to the district magistrate to essentially A, implement the law, and B, also approve adoptions. But again, very important issue. I don't even know what kind of nuances would have come out of the discussion because it did happen. So
but I'm sure these kind of changes in the adoption law, giving all these blanket powers to the district magistrates, would eventually end up in more bribery. And somebody down the line, the DM will not be handling it. Somebody down the line.
Power from the judiciary to the bureaucracy, and that's never a good idea, I feel like.
Yeah, while some of these adoption homes are subject to abuse and probably need to be probed, the answer is not giving a district magistrate or an SDM or somebody the absolute powers to arbitrate and then decide. I mean, I don't think that is the solution, but
certainly not.
But the government is, sorry.
The kind of corruption that prevails in the bureaucracy. The kind of corruption that prevails.
Mr. Pradhan amended the definition of a heinous crime, a serious offense, and a petty offense under the Juvenile Justice Bill. So right now there is a definition of what is a heinous crime, what is a serious offense, and what is a petty offense. When a child is committing an offense, that has been modified as well. So you're right. This is hugely impact. I mean, if any parent in this country should be interested in what is happening in this bill. If you are a parent, one way or the other, this should be of interest to you. And we won't know because nobody discussed it in Parliament. It was passed. It just went through. Bringing this back to Radhika ji, it's interesting. You talked about, and as journalists, we remember this phase. It was popularly called policy paralysis, which was the end of UPA too, because nothing happened. They weren't able to do anything. Every time they went to Parliament, there was disruption. There was storming of the well. There was, nobody would get any work done. And then we would accuse the government of policy paralysis. Kuch nahi ho raha hai, what is going on? How is it then that the opposition led by Mr. Sushma Swaraj and Mr. Arun Jaitley was able to stop all policy? But here, the opposition is doing the same tactic, but no policy has been stopped. What is the difference?
The essential difference being the BJP was a strong and cohesive opposition, despite being out of power for 10 years. Let's not forget the BJP was voted out twice in 2004 and 2009. Despite that, I must say that Arun Jaitley and Sushma Swaraj were pretty effective LOPs. They managed to carry their party along, which is not to say that there was no friction. I mean, and Yashwant Sinha would have a different point of view occasionally, and Arun Shourie would not be on the same page. But despite that, these two LOPs kind of dominated the show. Now, Faye, where is the fulcrum of the opposition at the present moment? I cannot see one. I mean, Rahul Gandhi, yes, he decides to come on a tractor one day, he decides to ride a bike. Well, that might make for interesting optics, I don't know. But, the point is that what is happening once you enter parliament? Who is leading the opposition? And that is a huge question. I mean, you mentioned today's meeting of all the opposition parties that was not attended by the BSP. Not surprising. BSP hasn't really associated itself with the opposition, and the Aam Aadmi Party, which is at pains to maintain a distance from the Congress
as well as the
and up
BJP.
to the Punjab and Uttarakhand elections.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that is the reason. It's not because they are hobnobbing with the BJP or anything of that sort.
But Mayawati could be hobnobbing with the BJP. It's pretty evident. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past her. But in you have the Congress. I mean, the Congress's leader in the Lok Sabha is always looking over his shoulder, Adhikari, to see what Rahul Gandhi or what Sonia or Rahul want, and neither of them seems particularly proactive to me. So the Congress parliamentary party itself is kind of inactive. And the rest of the opposition, I mean, yes, you have the DMK, you have the Trinamool. And interestingly, it is really the Trinamool which is emerging in the forefront as the leader of the opposition. If you see any spark at all in the opposition, it is coming from the Trinamool. Yeah, okay. But, the Trinamool is still not being able to carry the entire opposition along. It has some way to go.
Yeah.
But I think, eventually the hope for the opposition lies in these robust regional parties. They have to take the lead and give the Congress the go-by. Enough is enough, I mean, let them sort out their in-house problems, the Congress. In the meantime, the opposition should take the lead and lead the opposition lead the non-BJP opposition for whatever it is worth. Because it is important for the opposition to make a mark in parliament inside the floor of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, which is not happening at all at the present moment.
Absolutely.
Meghnad, if you would just take us through the parliamentary importance of a standing committee and how that has been eroded, and how this latest instance of, effectively IAS officers refusing to appear before a standing committee, why that's a massive issue.
So it was very interesting to watch it unfold also. So essentially what happened is Dr. Shashi Tharoor was going around giving interviews before, like the week before, and saying that, oh, I'm the head of the standing committee and I'm going to look into this. Essentially, that is what he was doing. And now a few people got upset because they were like, we were not given the agenda of the meeting saying that we are going to discuss Pegasus. So a privilege notice was also filed against him, saying that without telling the members of the committee, you have already disclosed the agenda through the media. That was one part of what happened. Mm-hmm. After that, there were a series of two meetings that they were supposed to hold. One was on the Cinematographers Act. Again, a very controversial subject, which is currently there. Now that there was a lot of bawal there, it didn't happen. And then the next day, the meeting was supposed to be on data privacy. It was a pre-planned meeting, but now what is happening, because Pegasus has to do with data privacy as well. Mm-hmm. Shashi Tharoor and other members wanted to discuss it. So they summoned all these officers to give answers to questions. Now they gave excuses, essentially. I don't know what the excuses was, like, teacher mera homework kha liya kutte ne type, I don't know what their excuses were, but they didn't show up. And the thing is, even the MPs of BJP, 15 MPs who showed up at the committee, they were there, but they refused to sign the register. So then they couldn't meet the quorum, and therefore the meeting couldn't happen. So it was such a bizarre thing to watch happen also. Like, I mean, I was following it through Twitter and different reports only. It's very important for people to know what a standing committee is, right? A standing committee is like a mini parliament. It has, as you said, representation from all parties. 30 people in it with cross-party lines representation. Their job is to take up an issue, summon officers, question them, put their responses into a report, and then present it to Parliament. So essentially, they have no punishing power or judicial power or anything of that sort. It's a fact-finding mission. So it's literally about gathering more information and giving it to the public. Now, BJP is trying to stall that also, which is very dangerous, right? I mean, the committee cannot do anything realistically.
We have to note for our audience how many standing committees they were, how that number was whittled down, and how fewer and fewer things are being referred to standing committees at all.
Absolutely.
Because earlier, if a bill was very complicated and needed more work, the Parliament would say, refer it to the standing committee, let the standing committee come back with suggestions because this is a complicated issue, and then we will make up our mind.
I will give you...
That was the system earlier.
No, but I will give you one example of a good use of this, which is the Motorways Act, right? So Motorways Act was presented last year and it was sent to the standing committee, and for 2 years it was in the standing committee. After that, it came to Parliament and got passed. But the thing is, everybody agreed with it. So earlier there were a lot of issues, but because it went to the standing committee, they suggested a lot of amendments. Those amendments were made, a newish bill was brought in, and then a better act was passed. And that is how standing committees are very important. But that is just one example. After that, I have rarely seen anything like this happening, which is a bill is being sent and then is being considered, and then people are giving suggestions, amendments, and then it is being brought to Parliament and being passed. This also ties in with disruptions, what is happening, and this is also to do with our parliamentary structure a little bit, that the government gets to set the agenda for everything. The opposition cannot do it. The government is the one who will tell you which bills are coming in. The government will be the one telling you which issues will be accepted and discussed in the House of Parliament. The BAC, which is the Business Advisory Committee, also plays a role. But now what is happening is even that committee has become ineffective because of the majority. So it's like the government will set the agenda, they will bulldoze things through. The opposition will have no say. And that is very dangerous.
Radhika ji wanted to say something.
He said it. He talked about the business advisory committees, which used to meet very regularly when Parliament is usually in session. But Meghnad is absolutely right. Under this government, the BAC meetings have become are held, but they've become very short, almost as pro forma. You attend, but the government has already decided the agenda, and there is no deviation from that. In other words, they do exactly what they want. Yes, standing committee, there is data from the PRS which suggests that in UPA 1 and 2, about 70% of the bills or the proposed legislations went through the standing committee. Now, in this particular thing, it has shrunk to like 10% or 11%, if that. It's when the government finds it convenient to shelve something like the land acquisition bill. And why did the amendments in the land acquisition bill, which came in Modi's first tenure, and why did they decide to shelve it? Because there was opposition from the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, from within the RSS and the BJP, not because of the opposition. The opposition had no role to play. So then it was it was expedient for the government to refer it to the standing committee and then put it on the back burner. So it's the same thing with the women's reservation bill. Each time the bill comes, it is referred to a select committee, a joint select committee, or a standing committee, simply because male members across the board want to buy time and don't want the bill to be passed. But this particular thing you've listed, Meghnad listed so many bills, motorways, or earlier Faye, you also listed so many bills. I think each one was a fit case to be referred to a panel for greater scrutiny.
That shows how despotic we are. The regime is turning, because it's even if these bureaucrats are not turning up at a meeting, as pointed out by Meghnad, it must be because of somebody's direction from above.
Yeah, absolutely.
As it is believed that everything is centralized in the PMO.
Yeah.
So the word, I'm pretty sure that word comes from there, and it is the bureaucracy connected with that man, with the top man.
PMO,
which is taking a call.
I just want to point out one thing to the panel. Parliament is currently in session. At the same time, we have two state governments state police shoot at each other over the border,
Mm-hmm.
issue advisories to their citizens not to cross and go into the other state. I mean, I don't want to use the term civil war, but I don't know how else to describe this because it has never happened in the country.
Never happened
before.
in the past. Yeah.
Both state governments of Assam and Mizoram, both run by the NDA, both controlled by the BJP, at each other's throats. Where is the discussion in parliament? Where is the accountability? Who is going to ask the Home Ministry how this happened? I mean, this is where the citizens lose out, right? Something so serious. And I've been reading all of the comments and all the columns written by experts on it. Nobody has been able to fully explain why this happened or what the, why it escalated now. Something that has been a problem since the 1900s. Why it escalated now? And we don't have these answers because we don't have parliament functioning as it should. And there are things that are happening on a daily basis that are just being swept under the carpet because parliament is not functioning. It's shocking, Radhika ji. This is my issue with it. As a citizen, I have no accountability.
Yeah, ideally, Faye, I mean, the opposition, I wish they'd insisted on a discussion on this rather than Pegasus. Of course, the government wouldn't have given in because, yes, both the governments, one is a full-fledged BJP government and the other is an NDA government in Mizoram. And there is information which is incriminating, which is absolutely embarrassing for the government. But, the opposition could have stood its ground and demanded a debate. After all, the Congress and other parties do have a stake in the Northeast. You can't just brush it under the carpet and say, leave the resolution for another day because there is no resolution. I mean, these border conflicts have been happening in the Northeast for a long time, but it is the first time that you're actually seeing two states at war with each other. I mean, I won't hesitate to use the term war.
This is unprecedented.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've had inflammatory statements coming from the Chief Minister of Assam. And then the Mizoram CM is reacting in response. And there was even a Meghalaya MP who chimed in and, weighed in with Mizoram. So it's an extremely explosive situation in a very sensitive, conflicted region of the country. When Parliament is in session, it is really tragic, I think, the issue is not discussed. I mean, this is, I think, you can't expect anything worse than this to happen. In normal circumstances, had it been another government, they would have had to make a statement. And
imagine what would happen if, Mr. Pradhan, if Maharashtra and Karnataka were shooting at each other across the border. The fact that the mainstream media sort of sidestepped it, made it seem like a little skirmish on the street between two rounds of gundas. It was so random.
Some of the mainstream media wouldn't talk about, some of the mainstream media run by the Bhakts would not even make a mention of it, if that were the case. The way that things are being distorted, that is where it's a kind of BJP thinks that's a win-win situation for them. And because whatever they want to push under the carpet, they are able to conveniently do. Because the mainstream media will not talk about it. Whatever they do not want does not come in the mainstream media at all. It is a few people like Faye D'Souza and a few others on the YouTube and Facebook that you get to see today. The tragedy is that BJP has managed to push anything that they want under the carpet, and the media, the mainstream media, is completely under their control. You tell me of one television channel or a print which writes independently, except maybe the Indian Express. I'm taking names because otherwise the situation is just terrible. And that is how they get away with murder. And they think and whatever they want to bombard you with, they succeed in doing it. The narrative is built by them on falsehood, and they manage to push it through. Because with the entire the media, the social media which may talk about it, is made to seem as if they are all, and particularly in states like UP, you may, for all you know, you may be hauled up under the National Security Act if you do that. Because the whole approach, we are heading towards a very dangerous situation where democratic norms and values have been just put aside. And
there
there
was
is
one
little that you
question.
get. And
Yes.
now Parliament gets stalled. So again, that comes to their advantage. This is where the opposition has to use its, has to discern between and they have to realize that midway something has to be done, a balance has to be struck, so that the ruling dispensation does not take undue advantage in the manner that it is doing.
So Meghnad, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to come to this point again, that the responsibility of running the house is on the government, right? We have to keep saying that again and again, because I feel like, sure, questioning the opposition, you can do it. What is their strategy? What is their... But I feel like we then tend to lose focus on what is the government's accountability in this whole thing, right? Because the government's accountability is also to listen to the opposition, which is not happening, right? So, for instance, with the Pegasus thing, if you take that example, last week or the week it broke, first week, the minister came and gave a statement in both houses. A statement is not a discussion; it's a declaration. They're telling you what they want to say, but they will not listen to you. They will not answer your questions. The simple questions that the not just the opposition but everybody is asking is: did you or did you not buy that software? Did you or did you not spend taxpayer money on it? And who did you use it on? Were there innocent civilians involved? Were there election commissioners involved? Were there judges involved? Who did you use it on? Right? There are zero answers to this. Right?
Yeah.
So the opposition's anger, the MPs coming together, that whole press conference in the rain that happened, and even today's breakfast meeting that happened, these are all signs that the opposition is upset and they are not getting the answers that they want. Another thing that was being floated around was a mock parliament. So now the opposition is also considering holding a parallel parliament because the government is not listening to them and answering any of their questions. Now think about that. Like you have
I don't understand what will they achieve in holding a parallel parliament? Effectively, they'll be asking questions with no answers.
Yeah, to nobody. Yeah, exactly. Like on one side, the government will pass bills. On the other side, the government will outrage about it. So there's nothing there. It's such a ridiculous situation we have come to.
Let's also remember that the problem of the farm bills came because of this, because opposition effectively either got suspended or walked out, and so they were no longer in the room, and even better.
Exactly.
So that is the same strategy they are using now.
Yeah.
One thing,
having succeeded.
Just one line
I just want to one second. I come back to you. I just want to answer some of the things that are popping up in the chat box. I just want to tell you guys, I know there are many people upset that we did not take up the case of the rape and murder of the child, the Dalit child in Delhi. You want us to take it up. I understand and I agree that it is a very serious thing, but you must remember that on this YouTube channel, we don't do reactionary conversations. We wait until we get the right people to comment on something. So I'm not going to just cobble together a panel and then just be angry for an hour. I don't think it serves anybody's purpose. We're trying to get the right people to talk about that particular case so that we can understand the issues better. So we're going to take an extra day to be able to do it right, rather than just put together a group of people who are just angry at the situation, because we're all angry at the situation and we don't take advantage of emotion to make our conversations more popular. We're going to do this the right way, but we will do it. I'm giving you that assurance. So
Faye, if it helps, Newslaundry is sending a ground team. I think they already went today to do like some ground reporting on what happens. So if you want, like, you can use that report and it will be a good starter for you to understand what really happens.
Actually, so we'd love to have the Newslaundry team talk to us tomorrow and tell us what they experienced when they went on the ground as well, because we don't have reporters in Delhi at this point. So we will do this, guys. I want to assure you. But what we're discussing today is also important. And it also deals with so many important things. Meghnad, go ahead. You were talking about the strategy at this point, and the fact the government finds the opposition playing into its hands.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one line. The parliament has been on this steady decline since I think 2010, 2011, and we have just seen it decline and decline and decline, and now we are here, right? Where it's essentially not functioning, even if there's a semblance of it functioning. One very funny example I'll give you of how it's not functioning. If you look at Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, you will not see protests there, because so say for instance, Jaidev Galla was raising discussion on water purifiers, right? So he was speaking, but they were showing like random shots from here and there and the side face of the speaker, etc. You will realize that even the cameramen are trying to not show the protests anymore. They will not show anything. So sometimes you will see like banners come up in the middle of the shot and this camera angle suddenly changes to a very awkward, weird angle. So that is the level we have come to, where the parliament is not even showing the protests happening inside parliament. So it's very dangerous when you think about all these optics as well that the government is trying to put forward.
Yeah.
Second thing is, if you want to make parliament better, our job is to watch it first, right? So, I mean, I think it's also a responsibility of the media to keep a close watch on nuances like these. Like what are the bills being passed? What is it about? How does it affect you? These are very simple things to sort of make note of. And your Newslaundry is trying to do that. So check out my
mainstream media is not going to do it.
Yeah, the
Don't expect.
No, Sharat. Media's presence has been minimized in Parliament with COVID as an excuse. I mean, it's so regulated that I have an L&D pass, which should give me access into Central Hall, and which I was using in the pre-pandemic era.
Has been suspended.
Yes, now Central Hall is out of bounds for media persons. We cannot enter. Okay, now even if I want to cover Parliament, I have a permanent pass, but no. The Rajya Sabha office or the Lok Sabha office has to okay, and I will only get a daily pass, which enables me to cover the session for just that day.
So you're not allowed to go to the Central Hall anymore?
No. Stopped since 2020, since the pandemic. The pandemic has come in as a very convenient
excuse for them.
Yeah, even ex-MPs are not allowed inside Central Hall. Now, they've rationed media presence to such an extent that on any given day, only 20 journalists are allowed in each house to cover.
And those 20 must be there.
The agencies and Doordarshan, ANI, of course, and that sort of thing.
Speaking of ANI, Radhika ji, there was this one tweet that ANI put out, which I thought was really interesting. I find ANI fascinating these days. They've put out a tweet from government sources, government sources that have quoted how many hours the opposition has wasted in Parliament. Now, this should technically be on record information. Why does it come from government sources? Why ANI is quoting government sources? I don't know. But there is, like Meghnad said quite rightly, none of us, as ordinary citizens sitting across the country, none of us know what is happening inside of Parliament. We'd love to sit and watch Rajya Sabha TV all day, but we all have jobs, so people are doing their own thing. It's really through the eyes of the media and the interpretation of the media that we know what's happening, right? So
and because they've streamlined and rationed the media presence, nobody wants to fall foul of the government, so it will the coverage will be very sanitized in the end. You are not going to, you're not going to show, there have been MPs who have even got into confrontations with the marshals and all in this very session. But none of them is going to come out, none of that is going to come out in the media because the media doesn't want to be victimized by the Parliamentary Affairs Ministry or whoever is the sanctioning authority for the passes. Since they've decided to give passes on a daily basis and not even recognize permanent passes, it is a pathetic situation that the press.
That's really terrible.
It's a press censorship and unwritten press censorship. What else? I think this is worse than what one had seen in the emergency days.
Probably.
But the weird thing is that even before this happened, before the COVID thing happened, and now they're using it actively to prevent media, the media wasn't really covering Parliament, to be honest. It was showing like whenever disruptions happened, they would take like a 10 to 15 second clip of the disruption and then play it on loop all day to make it look like the Parliament is not functioning. And actually, in the first hour, if the disruption happens, the later hours when the work actually happens, nobody will talk about that. So there was bizarre coverage happening then as well. But now if what Radhika ji told us right now, that is even more dire, where you're not even letting the whatever little was happening from coming out in Parliament. That's just...
So basically, if a journalist needs to be able to do their job, which means you have to be able to go into Parliament, You have to only write nice things about government. Otherwise, they won't. I mean, what is this? I mean, how far away from North Korea are we at this?
I think, just a little correction there. I don't think that's also true because, so for instance, if you are trained in legislative policy and how to sort of extract information from, say, questions or, read bills and read uncorrected debates and everything, you are still able to cover parliament properly. I mean,
no, but Meghnad, let's be honest. For Radhika ji, for example, a lot of the conversations will happen over chai in the central hall during the breaks, right?
Sure.
Where you go and ask opposition, what is your strategy? What are you doing? You ask government what you're doing, and that's where the story comes from. Otherwise, I mean, just reading reports, which is it's not the same texture. Radhika ji, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. The Central Hall was a repository of information for those who wanted, to cover the goings on behind the scenes in a serious way. Meghnad rightly talked about Parliament coverage. When I was covering Parliament, every newspaper used to have a week in Parliament, which kind of where you went through the highlights of the week. And we were expected to stay put in whatever house we were assigned to and pick up nuances, pick up, little details in the bills and in the discussions, which added to, which gave you solid information. And it was not just about covering disruptions. Of course, disruptions were always par for the course, but, our papers also took Parliament seriously. Probably that seriousness has been diminishing over the years, possibly, because I don't see a week in Parliament kind of thing any longer in any newspapers, at least.
Absolutely. And it's tragic that Parliament used to be such a glorious beat, like it was one of the most sought after beats in journalism. And now it's come to a state where it's not. Now everybody wants to be on debate shows. So, there
must be a lot of people who must be interested in that only to keep because they know which side of the toast to butter.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've run out of time, but I just want to tell our audience, it's really up to us. And I keep saying this over and over again. We're custodians of this democracy in this country, right? We have to hand it over to our children and the generations that come after. We don't want to be the generation that dropped the ball by not paying attention, by not asking more questions. Our grandparents fought for independence, then our parents and our, that generation fought the emergency. If there are corners being cut in Parliament, it should be of relevance to us. We should know, we should pay attention, we should read more about it, we should understand. What we're going to do is raise a generation of 20-year-olds and 15-year-olds who don't remember what life was like before this sort of Parliament, and that will be a tragedy. If anything, and I see this as my responsibility, and this is the reason why I have conversations about Parliament, why I carry Parliament updates on my news bulletins, is because I believe that the younger folk who are now 18, who don't remember a government before this one, because they were 12.
That's right.
When this government came into place, we have to remind them what Parliament is about. We have to remind them what the democracy is about. We have to remind them that they have to demand better. That this is not something that you just accept as, okay, how sad. This is really crappy, but there's nothing we can do about it. That's not the case. And it's up to us to push that point that we had better, we will have better in the future. And it can only happen if we push. Because this current situation of what's happening in Parliament is unacceptable. In a democracy, it's unacceptable. Let's stop beating around the bush and asking polite questions about, is this okay? It's not okay. And we're losing out on a daily basis. I mean, the fact that the Cinematographers Act was modified, what does it mean? It means tomorrow the censor board will actually chop off a piece of a film, and that film producer will have nowhere to go because there's no tribunal for them to appeal to. That's what it means. That is serious censorship.
Have they done away with the tribunals?
Yes, as of today. Lok Sabha
today.
has. It hasn't gone to Rajya Sabha yet, but this has happened today. The tribunals have been done away with today. These are serious, serious things that are going to affect us in our lives, that are going to affect our children. It's going to affect the fabric of our democracy. It scares me to think that we don't have enough conversation about it. I want to thank my panelists for making time and for being so patient in answering all of these questions. Thank you for helping us understand the issue better. To our audience, the news comes up at exactly 9 o'clock, which is only the information, no opinion. And tomorrow we will come back with a proper conversation about the crime in Delhi. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, Faye.